I have the honor of introducing Michael Duncan tonight. I've known Michael for about 6 years. He's been an entrepreneur for many years. He has a lot of insight on what makes business work. He actually has experienced some business failures as well and business successes. So he's got a lot to bring to the table tonight, and I don't want to take too much time away from his speech, or his interview. So Michael, take it away.
Well, Brandon, you want to, if Brandon doesn't control it, I'll talk all night. So
no,
Brandon,
I'm going to control it.
That's what I
was just going to say, here we go. I just wanted to say thank you for being here. And I want to start with an intro to you. I think that Len just contextualized a little bit about who you are as a person, as well as some of your business ventures. But can you give us an executive summary of your life as an entrepreneur thus far?
Sure. I'm a serial entrepreneur. And that's just to say that I've done it a lot of different ways at a lot of different times. But I started my entrepreneurial career in 1986 after I got out of the Army. Of the 8 functional businesses that actually launched, 7 of them are complete, and I'm no longer involved in them. But of those 7, 1 was a failure. 5 had various levels of success from okay to absolutely wonderful. And 1 was an unmitigated frickin' disaster. Thankfully, that was business number 4. Business number 6 was the first one I started in Southern Virginia. I too, Jade, am from Northern Virginia, a little tiny town called Alexandria. And we built a very, very successful business. Business number 7, which was also down here, was a failure. I will tell you, do not start a business at the beginning of an economic recession that's really called the Great Recession. It's a good way to lose a lot of money. Of course, never saw it coming, but that's what happened. Business number 8, I've started down here. It is not making any money yet. It is pushing my patience button out the window. But effective yesterday, I took operational control of it. I was a minority owner. Now I'm the 51% owner, and hopefully I can fix it. But if not, it'll be one more lesson learned. So there's the summary. I've been there, done that, have the t-shirt.
Appreciate that. So how did you, knowing that you have a history in the military and then you transitioned into entrepreneurship, was that a linear path, or how did you get started in entrepreneurship?
I was always interested in it. As a teenager, the junior achievement stuff in high school, yeah, I had my own paper out. I mean, all the things that you do as a young kid trying to figure out what it is you want to do for a living. I'm a 5th generation soldier, so I really don't think I had much of a choice in being in the Army. But it was a good experience, especially in discipline. I will tell you, you learn how to manage your 168 hours a week pretty well, because somebody's telling you what you need to do. But when I got out of active service, I took a real job, as my wife calls them, and I just wasn't happy. And so I hung a shingle out and got started. A pretty decent writer, and that was my first start. I created a little technical writing company. Living in the Beltway around Washington, D.C., they always need technical writers. And so I got off to a pretty good start. It just it blossomed from there. The one thing I will say about my career that's maybe a little different from others, I've never done the same thing twice. I do one, and then I try something completely different. I think that's probably a personality trait. Some people might call it a flaw, but that's that.
Yeah, I think that it's probably indicative of your mindset as a serial entrepreneur, right? It's hard to start one thing and then do that same thing over again. If you're not a serial entrepreneur, you would probably just scale one of your businesses instead.
No. Well, I get them. I do real well at getting them started, getting them in black ink, building them to a certain point, and then I get bored. And that's when I usually sell out, either to people that are in the business with me or to most of the time to a customer. A bank bought one of my businesses. Another manufacturer bought business number 6. Yeah, that kind of thing. And then I went on to do something else. I wish I hadn't sold 6 and done 7, but you live and you learn.
So with that, what do you love most about what you do now, I guess?
Well, I actually have 2 loves right now. Of course, business number 8 is another startup. So there's an adrenaline rush. There's the crush of time. There's all the rest of it. But then I do a fair amount with the SBDC because it's my way of giving back. I just think it's important to help others. And so that's why I like to drive Lynn crazy. So, and I get paid for it. So.
I can understand that as a colleague of yours and his. Sorry, Lynn. And then, so the next question is, how did you initially figure out costs? Is like, where do cost, ongoing costs, variable costs, fixed costs come into play with any of your businesses?
Well, costs impact every business. In the very beginning, I had nothing. I mean, I literally was just out of the Army, so on and so forth. But I sat down and I began to calculate what it would take to perform work and pay myself, because I was the one guy doing it in the beginning. And then when I added other people, I had to make sure that I had enough work to keep them busy. I understood that there were business costs associated with the business, whether it's a simple filing fee for your business license, or it's the liability insurance, which always usually causes people to choke. And a lot of that I didn't know in the beginning. I learned the hard way. But as each business progressed, I got better and better at modeling the costs, so that by the time I got to business number 5, I really knew what to look for, even though it was a different industry. And so understanding where all the costs come from and how they filter in, and then how you have to cover them, because some of them are a one-off cost, a capital expenditure. Others are operating expenditures. Some you pay once a year, and others come up every time you do a payroll. And some of them are hidden. For example, in payroll, in addition to what you're paying the individual and whatever costs are associated with any benefits that you apply, say you give them 2 weeks of vacation, or you give them 10 days of holiday pay, you find out there's a state unemployment surcharge, there's a federal unemployment surcharge. Not only are you paying the 7.65% as the employer, there's a cost to run the payroll every month. And you just by experience begin to be able to quantify those. So my clients I play with, I say, look, you're going to pay somebody $10 an hour. You need to plan to spend $11 an hour, because that's what it's going to be.
Yeah, it's often, and we're obviously going to get into the topic of break even during the session tonight, but often revenue to expenses it's not a one-to-one, because you have to consider your variable costs and fixed costs and how they
and that's very true, because my simple equation is cash in over time, from whenever you start to whenever you end it. Cash in minus cash out has to be greater than 0. There are points in time where you've got more cash out than you've got cash in, but over time, if you don't do that, you don't have a business, because you need that extra cash to carry you through the times where the cash going out is greater than the cash coming in. Because if you don't, then you fail. That's what happened to business 7. Okay, I didn't properly position it, understanding what was going to happen to the marketplace because of the recession, and so all of that money that was invested on the front end, I couldn't carry the debt because I couldn't finish the project to get the cash to come in to do that. And coming home and telling my wife and my partner that I was going to shut down and we were going to write off $800,000 was not a pleasant conversation. We did only have to write off 400 in the end because we were able to sell the property, but it was not fun. And folks, that wasn't the disaster. So you can imagine what the disaster was like. Mrs. Duncan was happy.
Well, that's actually what I was gonna ask next is what went wrong? I know that you're mentioning the economic recession, and you're briefly touching around like liquidity and making sure that you have enough cash to sustain. Was that the the straw that broke the camel's back, to say, or what was it that was the pitfall?
Well, we'll use business 7. That was a real estate development project. When we started the project, the planning part of the project, the financing we arranged for said that we got the commercial buildings built, we spent that money, and then to get the construction financing for the rest of it, we simply needed to have 10% of it pre-leased, and we needed to have 50% equity in the project. And so we did that math. So, and I'm going to use round numbers because it's easy. Of $1 million project, we had to have $500,000. Okay, that was fine. And we spent all of that money doing site development work, getting it ready. I lined up some initial tenants for the building. But as the recession hit, and what I didn't understand, and I don't think anybody could understand at that point, is that by the time we got a year into it, the underwriting criteria had changed to the point where the banks wanted 95% equity and they want 100% pre-leased in an economic recession. Doesn't work. Not in Danville, Virginia. It might have worked in Washington, D.C., but not in Danville, Virginia. And it became apparent that we were never going to make it. And all the site development work, all the footers, all the rest of it that we had done as our equity investment, we couldn't get the rest of the financing. And so the project had to die. We had to kill it. Because quite honestly, I had no more money to put into it.
Yeah, I'll just say that is sometimes a common conversation when I work with clients. Probably not, usually not at the scale that you're talking about with multi-million-dollar investments, but just even small scale investments and making sure that you have set aside enough cash to get through seasonality of a particular business. If you're opening up a coffee shop in a university location and you open up as students are leaving, or just little things like that can make huge detriment to your actual revenue and therefore your cash flow. So yeah, I appreciate you describing that in depth, Michael. I think the one thing, the wrap-up question for this would be, what advice would you give any of these aspiring entrepreneurs or existing businesses in their path?
This is exactly what I tell my clients. You need to be incredibly conservative in your revenue estimates and incredibly aggressive in your expense estimates. Even having done this as many times as I have, I always underestimate the expense side of it. Business 8's a perfect example. Who could count on the pandemic? Business 6 survived September 11th, but Business 8 may not survive the pandemic because we've had to carry it for so much longer. And we could have never anticipated that. So you just have to understand that life happens. But at the same time, if you run a very lean model, then you stand the chance of weathering the storm. So be conservative in your revenue and aggressive in your expenses, and make sure there's black ink at the bottom of that model. Because if there's not, you need to stop before you start. If there's not black ink at the end of the first year, you need to seriously think hard about it. And if there's not black ink by the end of the second year, don't start. Don't start, because it will never, ever catch up.